Manchester City have sacked Gareth Taylor. With the League Cup final just 5 days away, Man City have taken the bold decision to sack their manager. Nick Cushing, former Man City manager, comes in on an interim basis and will have the unenviable task of getting this City team firing in time for the League Cup final on Saturday. This is why Man City have sacked Gareth Taylor. Alright, let's get into it then. Manchester City have sacked Gareth Taylor a week, in fact 5 days, before the Women's League Cup final. Harry, an utterly bizarre decision. It came as a huge surprise, right?
Yeah, very much so. As you say, 5 days before a cup final is one of the most strangest things to do. When I understand from a City point of view, obviously the decision, and we'll talk about that as a whole, but you have to take it in these circumstances. To sack a manager before a League Cup final is never the right thing to do. Yeah. You can never put that kind of pressure on a new manager. You weaken yourself so much going into the final. So for Man City, really bizarre timing, a massive surprise. You're giving the new manager 4 games against Chelsea in a row. It's a terrible time to do it, and they've had warning signs, they've had real problems this season, but they've waited until after they've got through to the FA. They thought, do you know what, we've just won. We've won our quarter-final in the FA Cup. We're through to the semi-finals. We've now got a League Cup final, and we played Chelsea 4 times in a row. You know what we'll do? Let's sack our manager, because that's a really smart thing to do. Yeah. But yeah, really, really shocked.
And I think that's the confusing aspect of it, because the final's this Saturday. In 7 days' time, Gareth Taylor could have been an absolute hero if he'd won that game. And if he doesn't, sack him then.
Yeah.
Because, realistically, I don't think City will beat Chelsea over 2 legs in the UWCL. And the WSL game, I think Chelsea will rest us. There's a good chance City gets something from that. But at least give Taylor the League Cup final, because if he wins that, he proves that he can win things, and you keep him in the role. If he loses it, then there you go. You sack him, then you bring in Nick Cushing. We'll get onto him in a moment. But it's a really bizarre decision to do it the week before the final. It throws a spanner in the works, I think, for both teams now, because Bonpastor's Chelsea side would have been preparing to play against the Taylor City side. How different City are going to look this Saturday remains to be seen, because the spanner in their works is that there could be a huge tactical change 5 days before the League Cup final. And while that could bear dividends, it could also see them not understand what they're trying to do on the day. So I think it's a really bizarre decision. I mean, the most parallel situation we've seen was in the men's game a few years ago when Tottenham sacked Jose Mourinho before the Carabao Cup final. Tottenham went on to lose that final. Now, granted, it is a different situation because City are bringing in someone who is not only a very good manager, but also someone who's worked with the team before, rather than a 28-year-old with no experience like Tottenham did. But it's still, I don't think, advised to sack managers before cup finals. There's a reason they're in that cup final. City won games under Gareth Taylor. They knocked Manchester United out. They knocked Arsenal out. It wasn't an easy run to the final. He deserved, and City deserved, with Taylor in charge, a chance to go and play that final.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise we're seeing reports of the players feeling shocked and confused as to why Taylor was sacked. What a terrible place to put your players in. What a terrible position to put your players in 5 days for a League Cup final.
Yeah, you're now relying on a squad who, I think the morale was pretty low anyway, but you're now relying on a squad to learn a new way of playing under a new manager in the space of 5 days to go and beat one of the best teams in the world over 90 minutes in a cup final. It's a mammoth task, and for Cushing and for Man City, it's either going to be heroic or disastrous. They could rock up in that final, play Chelsea off the park and win it, and it'd look like an incredible decision.
And Cushing gets a statue outside the Joey.
But the likelihood of that happening is very, 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 very minimal, and it's a real surprise. And as you said, yes, the league performance hasn't been good enough from City this season, but they are into the FA Cup semi-finals, and even if you take this competition, the Subway League Cup, they bounced back. They got trounced by Man United at Etihad. They bounced back in the midweek and beat them away from home again. And then even in the Arsenal game, they went behind in that game and they pulled it back in the last minute. A really, really good comeback. And they were 2 brilliant results that deserved to be in it, to deserve to get to the final, and to sack a manager who, yes, they do sit 4th in the league right now, but they're still in the Champions League. They've got a League Cup final and they're into the last 4 of the FA Cup. It could have ended. They could have won 3 trophies. That is the absurd thing. Is that I think it's a really, really strange decision. And it's not reactionary, because it's not like they lost 6-0 to Aston Villa or something. They beat them 2-0. Really bizarre thing to do.
And even so, the fact that the sacking in the official announcement was cited as Although the reason was cited as City were not needed to be in the Champions League. They didn't see that happening. City want to compete at the forefront, and the results haven't been there this season. Now, my problem with that reason is that in the next 2 weeks, City play one WSL game. So even if they lost that match, it wasn't going to make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. I still don't. I think City have as much chance of beating Chelsea in the WSL as they did under Gareth Taylor, which is a decent chance because Chelsea are going to be resting up in that game. Their focus, because they've got the gap in the league, is going to be on winning the League Cup final and getting through in the Champions League. That's Chelsea's prerogative right now. So I think in that game, City would have a decent chance of getting something from the game. I think with Nick Cushing, they have the same chance. And so it's a really confusing time to do it. If you wait till after this run of 4 games playing Chelsea, then bring Cushing in to try and win the last 5, hope United drop points at all of Chelsea, Arsenal, City, then you get Champions League football. That makes sense to me. I don't understand this decision. Because now, if they don't beat Chelsea in that WSL game, and they don't beat Chelsea in any of the 4 matches, huge questions will be asked. And I do fear that we're talking like we did about Amber Whiteley coming in, where it's like, well, they're Liverpool. I don't see the point of this. That they'd have a good chance of winning with Matt Beard, not with Amber Whiteley. Amber Whiteley went and beat Arsenal with Liverpool. Hopefully, from a Chelsea fan perspective, that doesn't happen here with Nick Cushing. In terms of Taylor's legacy, let's discuss it then, because before this, he was the longest-serving manager in the WSL. 2 trophies at his time at Manchester City, the League Cup being the most recent in 2022 and an FA Cup back in 2020. Considering Chelsea's dominance over that period, it isn't the worst return.
No, it's not. It is really strong, and as as we pointed out when Arsenal got knocked out on Sunday, Arsenal haven't won the FA Cup for 10 years. So for Man City to win that FA Cup, I know it's only one, but it's once more than Arsenal have, who are an incredible team. Yeah. Man United have got a couple in there, and obviously Chelsea have won loads of them, so that's really fun. But yeah, it wasn't bad from Taylor.
Let's not forget, last season they only lost the league on goal difference.
It's incredibly harsh. It's absolutely incredibly harsh because in another universe, a couple more goals that Man City scored, and if Chelsea had scored a couple less or conceded a couple more, we'd be sitting here and Gareth...
If City just cleared the ball rather than let Stina Blackstenius score a brace.
That is true. Even a point in that game.
Exactly.
If they'd only conceded 1, we'd be sat here and Gareth Taylor would have been a WSL champion. That would be a completely different story. And I think it's a really interesting one. For them to say that, obviously, I know they sit 4th right now, they're not currently getting UWCL football for next season. But
I get why that is a focus for them, though.
It's a complete toss-up, as you say. I understand from a board point of view, from a directors and a money point of view, they want to be in the UWCL. But as a team, as a manager, I'm sure Gareth Taylor, if you'd asked him, he would rather win the League Cup or the FA Cup than get into the UWCL. I think if you'd asked him that, that would have been the focus. And maybe that's where the slight problem was, is that they wanted the focus to be on getting into the top 3, whereas Taylor and the squad wanted to go and win trophies. And I feel it's incredibly harsh on him because they sit 4th right now. But I know they've had some poor results, but I don't really know much else they can do. You've got a Man United side who are currently won 7 on the bounce, could make it 8 this weekend and go only 5 points off Chelsea. How I don't get how City could have been better than United this season,
or Chelsea for that matter.
Or Chelsea, and then Arsenal have. I think with Arsenal it's different because they started really poorly and they had Eidevall in charge to start with, so that's where the frustration will be. Is that City will probably think they should be ahead of Arsenal, but the form that Arsenal been on, across like the winter period was absolutely brilliant. So I do. It's not one of those where City are playing poor. Yes, they're not playing brilliantly. But I don't think that's the sole reason why they're outside the top 3. I think the teams who occupy those 3 places right now have had stellar seasons so far.
But also, I think huge leeway has to be given for the fact that they've missed Alex Greenwood for a large part of the season now, Lauren Hemp for a large part of the season, and Khadija Shaw for a good few months. Or a good month. So I think leeway has to be afforded there for Man City, and it simply hasn't. And I get it. They've offered players contracts and incentives based on Champions League football. They know that players like Caroline joined in January so she could play in the Champions League. And they know that if they don't qualify for the Champions League, they run the risk of losing players like Lauren Hemp, Khadija Shaw, Leah Alexander is gone, whatever happens. But that's the problem now for City. It's that clash of goals on the pitch and aims and objectives on the pitch versus boardroom aims and objectives. And the boardroom know they need the Champions League revenue and they need to be able to hold on to those players. On the pitch, they want to win trophies. But that is clashing at the moment because City need to be in the Champions League at boardroom level. So, yeah, it's just one of those situations where those two have clashed. I think the official stated reason in the communication from Manchester City is probably not the official stated reason behind the scenes. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a disagreement there between Taylor and the board. I imagine Taylor was frustrated at the fact that despite the number of injuries in January, over the winter break, I don't think they did enough in January. They brought in a centre half, but they were still in a situation where they didn't have enough, and they were playing last weekend with Gracie Pryor and Leah Alexandri. That's a 19-year-old and a right back. Yeah. That's not a centre half partnership that's going to go and win things. So I feel for Taylor in that regard, because this weekend the Women's League Cup final is no different for Nick Cushing. Knack's still out injured, and Alex Green was still out injured. So City are going into a League Cup final with a centre half partnership of Alexandra and Gracie Pryor. Now, I think Gracie Pryor's going to be a great player one day, but she's not there yet. And I think Alexandra is a very good right back, but she's had a tough season at centre half. That for me is a huge reason why they are conceding as many as they are, why they are making as many mistakes as they are, because they didn't invest in January. So I think there would have been that frustration from Taylor at the board's lack of investment in January.
Yeah, and even if Lazelle comes in again, that's a fullback. Yeah, and she's still very young and not quite the complete player. So
even a Lazelle Alexandra partnership is two makeshift defenders, two makeshift centre halves. They're fullbacks by trade.
Especially when Alexandri's been out of sorts for the last couple of months. And
Lazelle's come back from a long-term injury.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre decision. You're changing the manager, but they've got the same tools. And no offense to Nick Cushing, but I don't think he's an incredible upgrade on Gareth Taylor. I don't think he's going to come in and make something wonderful with the lack of kind of players that he's got. So it's going to be very interesting to see what on earth he can come up with, because I would have given Taylor the 4 Chelsea games and then seen where they're at. If they've won the League Cup final,
or at least the League Cup final,
then sack him after that and roll the dice in the USL. But City have taken it's a massive gamble. It is a massive gamble, and Nick Cushing could come in and win the League Cup final, get them through in the UWCL, and it could be a completely different story. But the chances of that happening would be incredible.
Well, let's talk about Nick Cushing. I think his return reminds me of the scene in the US office where Michael Scott returns from his summer vacation and he's driving down in a sports car and he goes, "It's Britney, bitch." I can picture that with Nick Cushing. With the shades on, a light blue Man City sports car. That's what I'm picturing as he comes back into training. But he's back in as an interim manager. Obviously, former Manchester City manager. He's been with the NYCFC men's team for the last season or a few, I think. So, yeah, he's part of the City Football Group, which is why he's coming back in this role. I mean, obviously, he was linked with the Arsenal role. Do you think the reason why he rejected those advances was because he always had this on call?
Potentially. I think it would have been at certain points in the season, I think there would have probably been a little bit of a conversation to be had there where, it's like, "Oh, well, Nick, if we need you, can we call on you?" And he's probably said yes. But it's a smart, the way they've done it is really smart. It's not a permanent decision. He's only into the end of the season. If they have a brilliant run, then whatever happens, they'll reevaluate it in the summer. And I quite like that, because you're basically giving him a couple of months to gamble, see what he can win, see what he can get.
And if he comes away with League Cup, FA Cup and UWCL, then
that would be one of the best interim spells ever.
The best interim spell ever.
It would never be topped, because it would never happen again. But yeah, I understand it. It's familiarity for Man City, and that's kind of what you need when you aren't at your best. You're bringing in a manager who knows the squad, who knows the board and the directors, and who will get on, who has a decent relationship with them. So
honestly, I'm not sure there are many players anymore who would have been around in the Nick Cushing era.
Yeah,
that's the problem. But yeah, he's used to that environment. Some of the players will be familiar with him, and I understand therefore why they've brought him in. The boardroom know him; they know what to expect from him. They know he is a good manager, and that's the important thing. The question is, can he get this team firing in 5 days?
Yeah.
Because that is a very, very difficult ask. No matter the calibre of manager, that is a very difficult ask.
Yeah, as they say, he's experienced. He's a top manager, and on his day, I think he can come up with, tactically, he can try and battle some of the best managers, but you're giving him 5 days to try and outthink and outmastermind Sonia Bonpastor. It's really not going to happen.
But he does have the advantage of the unknown, in the sense that...
That is true.
What is Nick Cushing going to come up with in this game? He knows what Bonpastor is going to do.
He does.
Or at least could have an educated guess
Yeah.
at how Chelsea are going to play in this game. Chelsea have no idea what City are going to look like. So perhaps the element of surprise to win City a League Cup. But I think it's really odd timing of the decision.
I'll be intrigued to see if Cushing will what he'll decide to do, whether he'll decide to go and just take the gap, focus on what City can do, or whether he will just go. He's going to analyse what Bournemouth does for 5 days, just sit on it, just sit hours and hours of footage, and then just try and stop Chelsea playing like Chelsea and see what happens. But yeah, it's a hell of a gamble from City. It's a bizarre one to do. Because realistically, Man City Football Club should not be gambling their season away, because they could come away with no trophies, they could come away with 3 and end up finishing in the top 3. So no one knows now what's going to happen to Man City in the next couple of months. It's an absolute, it's an unknown, and it's really exciting because you have no idea what they're going to do, which is fun. But I can't imagine. But if I was a supporter, I don't think I'd like it very much.
No, it's a period of unknown, really. But I think the one benefit is that it is very stylistically similar. They play similar brands of football, which does open up the question of why bother sacking Taylor in that case. But I think the transition period shouldn't be too difficult. It's just how quickly can you get them firing, and will that make a difference for the League Cup final? And then obviously the subsequent games against Chelsea should be interesting. Yeah. We'll be back to discuss that game on Friday. In the meantime, that does round up, I think, everything we want to talk about today. Get involved in the comments down below. Give us your thoughts on this whole situation. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Man City fans with thoughts. I'm sure there'll be fans of rivals clubs with thoughts. So get involved in the comments below. We have another video on screen now if you want to go and check that out. And remember, tomorrow we'll be dropping our hot takes video. We react to your hot takes. So go and wait for that tomorrow. Other than that, though, thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.